Right. There's no easy way to start this because what's come out about Kasper Schmeichel is genuinely shocking, and it completely changes how we look at everything that's been happening this season. We're talking about a player who hasn't been seen on the pitch for a while, someone who quietly disappeared from matchday squads, and now we finally understand why. And honestly, the reality is far worse than most people probably expected. So here's the situation. Schmeichel has now confirmed that he's dealing with a severe shoulder injury that's going to require not just one, but two surgeries. And we're not talking about something minor here. This is a full breakdown of the shoulder. Torn bicep, torn rotator cuff, dislocation, labrum damage. It's the kind of injury list you usually hear when a player's season is over instantly, not something they've been carrying for months while still playing at the highest level. And that's the part that really makes you stop and think. Because when you hear him describe it, he basically compares it to an outfield player doing their ACL and Achilles at the same time. That's the level we're at. That's how serious this is. And yet, he's been out there, week after week, putting himself in goal, taking hits, diving, landing on that same shoulder, trying to push through. When you look back now, so many moments suddenly make sense. Those awkward saves, the times he seemed hesitant going to his left, the occasions where he used the wrong hand for what should have been routine stops. At the time, it looked like poor form, maybe even a lack of sharpness. But now, it's clear he was protecting himself. Every movement was calculated to avoid further damage, even if it meant compromising his performance. And the timeline just makes it even more unbelievable. This didn't just happen recently. This goes all the way back to that injury while on international duty with Denmark national football team, where he damaged his shoulder and never fully recovered. Instead of going through surgery back then, the decision was made to let it heal naturally. He missed a few matches, came back relatively quickly, and from the outside, it looked like he'd recovered. But clearly, he hadn't. Not even close. From that point on, it seems like he's been managing the pain rather than actually fixing the problem. Injections, painkillers, constant treatment just to stay available. And that might explain why, throughout the season, there was always that feeling something wasn't quite right. You could see it in the way he moved, the way he reacted after certain saves, even the way he avoided putting pressure on that side of his body. Then comes the moment that probably made everything worse. Another bad landing, more damage, and suddenly the situation goes from manageable to critical. And still, he kept playing. That's the part that's hard to wrap your head around. Because at some point, this stops being about toughness and starts becoming a serious risk, not just to his season, but to his entire career. He even admitted himself that he probably shouldn't have continued, that he pushed through because he had his eyes on international football, on representing his country again, on those massive tournaments that define careers. And whether you agree with that mindset or not, it does give you a glimpse into how players think. For someone like Schmeichel, football isn't just a job. It's everything. And stepping away, even when injured, clearly wasn't something he was ready to accept. But then you flip it around, and you have to ask serious questions about how this was allowed to happen in the first place. Because this isn't just about one player making a brave or risky decision. This is about a club continuing to select a goalkeeper who was clearly not fully fit. Game after game, decision after decision, sticking with him despite the visible signs that something was off. And that's where the frustration really starts to build. Because it wasn't like there were no alternatives. There were other options available, players ready to step in, players who had already shown they could perform when given the chance. Yet somehow, the choice kept being made to rely on someone who was effectively playing through a major injury. You think about the points dropped, the goals conceded, the fine margins that define a season, and it's impossible not to wonder how much this situation has actually cost the team. Because when your last line of defense isn't at full capacity, everything else becomes more fragile. And now, we're at the stage where the damage is done. The surgeries are coming. The recovery is expected to take somewhere between 10 and 12 months. And there's a very real possibility that we've already seen the last of him in a Celtic shirt. Not because of form, not because of selection, but because his body simply won't allow him to come back in time. And even beyond that, there's an even bigger question hanging over all of this. Whether he comes back at all. Because when you're dealing with injuries of this magnitude, especially at this stage of a career, nothing is guaranteed. Recovery isn't just physical, it's mental as well. The willingness to go through that long process, to rebuild strength, To trust your body again after something like this, that's a challenge in itself. And you could see it in the way he spoke. There was determination there, no doubt about it, but also a sense of uncertainty. Almost like he knows just how difficult this road is going to be and how much is stacked against him. And when you take a step back and look at the wider picture, this whole situation starts to feel even more troubling because it's not happening in isolation. This has been a season where injuries have piled up across the squad, and not just minor setbacks either. We're talking about key players missing huge portions of the campaign, forcing constant changes, breaking rhythm, and leaving the team struggling to find any real consistency when it matters most. You think about names like Cameron Carter-Vickers, who has barely been able to string together a proper run of games, or Alistair Johnston dealing with his own setbacks, and it starts to paint a picture of a squad that's been stretched to its limits physically. Then there's Callum McGregor, a player who's given everything season after season, now clearly showing signs of fatigue from being relied on so heavily without enough rotation. And that's where the concern really kicks in, because it doesn't feel like there's been a clear, structured approach to managing player fitness. It almost seems reactive rather than proactive. If a player says they're fit, they play. If they can get through a session, they're available. But at this level, that simply isn't enough. Modern football demands a much more controlled and data-driven approach, especially when you're competing across multiple competitions and every small detail can make a difference. The situation with Schmeichel is the most extreme example of that, but it's not the only one. It raises serious questions about how decisions are being made behind the scenes, because players, especially experienced ones, will almost always say they're ready. That's just the mentality. They want to be on the pitch, they want to contribute, and they'll push through pain if they believe it helps the team. But that's exactly why there needs to be a system in place to protect them, even from themselves at times. And while all of that has been unfolding, there's also movement happening elsewhere, particularly when it comes to potential additions and future planning. One name that's started to generate a bit of attention is Elliot Just, who's been quietly building a reputation with Motherwell FC. He's not necessarily a headline signing, but he's the type of player that fits a certain profile. Young enough to develop, already adapting to the demands of Scottish football, and showing glimpses of quality when given the opportunity. What stands out is his composure, especially in key moments. That goal recently, taken with real confidence, didn't look like something from a player still finding his feet. It looked natural, instinctive, and that's often what catches the eye when clubs are assessing potential signings. Not just consistency, but the ability to deliver in those decisive situations. Of course, any move like that would come with its own challenges. Transfer fees are rising across the board, even within Scotland, and clubs are becoming more reluctant to let players go without a proper return. So even for someone who might be seen as a squad option initially, the investment still has to make sense. But it's the kind of move that suggests a shift towards building depth, something that's clearly been lacking at times this season. At the same time, there's been a completely different kind of story unfolding on the international stage, involving Tomasz Kvankera. And this one has sparked a lot of debate, not because of performances on the pitch, but because of how comments off it have been interpreted. He's been left out of the national team squad, and the reasoning behind it has raised more than a few eyebrows. From his perspective, the comments seemed straightforward. A player focusing on proving himself at club level, wanting to establish his place, score goals, and contribute consistently before thinking about anything else. It's something you hear all the time. Players emphasizing their commitment to their club, especially after a recent move, wanting to win over supporters and justify the opportunity they've been given. But the reaction from the national team setup has been far from straightforward. Those words have been taken as a sign that representing his country isn't a priority, and that's led to his exclusion. It's a decision that feels harsh when you consider the context, especially given how early he is in his journey with the club. He's still settling in, still adapting, and naturally, that's going to be his main focus. What makes it even more surprising is how quickly the situation escalated. There wasn't any real attempt to clarify, no visible communication to understand the full context of what was said. Instead, it became a headline, a talking point, and ultimately, a reason to leave him out. And in modern football, where every word is analyzed and amplified, that kind of reaction can have a lasting impact. His representatives have already pushed back, making it clear that the comments were taken out of context, that the intention was never to dismiss international duty, but simply to highlight his current priorities. And when you look at it objectively, that explanation makes sense. A player can be fully committed to their national team while still recognizing that their immediate responsibility is to perform at club level. But situations like this show just how delicate that balance can be. One sentence, one interview, and suddenly the narrative shifts completely. And for a player trying to establish himself, that's the last thing you need. Instead of focusing purely on football, there's now an added layer of scrutiny, questions to answer, and a sense that every word has to be carefully measured moving forward. And all of this is happening at a time when the team can't really afford distractions. With so many challenges already in play, from injuries to inconsistent performances, the last thing needed is external noise pulling focus away from what's happening on the pitch. Because ultimately, that's where everything will be decided, and where players like Schmeichel will have the chance to respond in the best way possible. And that's really where the spotlight shifts now, because with everything that's been going on, there's a growing sense that certain players are going to have to step up in a much bigger way than originally expected. Opportunities are opening up, not by design, but by necessity. And when that happens, it can either expose weaknesses or create new leaders within the squad. The next run of matches is going to demand personality, composure, and a level of consistency that's been difficult to maintain so far this season. For someone like Tomasz Schmeichel, this could actually turn into a defining moment. All the noise around his international situation, all the debate, all the external pressure, it can either weigh him down or fuel him. And players at this level often respond best when they feel they have something to prove. Every touch, every run, every finish suddenly carries more meaning, not just for the team, but for his own trajectory moving forward. At the same time, the absence of a figure like Kasper Schmeichel doesn't just leave a gap in terms of position, it changes the dynamic of the entire back line. A goalkeeper isn't just there to make saves. It's about communication, organization, presence. Whoever steps in now has to bring that authority instantly, because there's no adjustment period left. The margins are too fine, and the pressure is only going to increase as the fixtures start to carry even more weight. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. There's a quiet hum building around the east end of Glasgow, the kind that tends to grow into a roar when something special is about to unfold. Word drifting through the corridors of Celtic Park suggests that the long-anticipated debut of the €25 million signing could be closer than many expected, and with it, perhaps, the beginning of a new chapter in the club's storied history. Those close to the dressing room have hinted that the player has settled quicker than predicted. Training ground whispers speak of sharp movement, composure on the ball, and a presence that has already caught the attention of senior figures. It's not just about talent, they say, it's about timing. Celtic have been searching for a figure who can shift the balance in decisive moments, and there's a growing belief this could be the one. Supporters, naturally, have begun to speculate. Social chatter is thick with anticipation, some suggesting that this signing represents more than just another addition. It could signal a shift in ambition, a statement of intent that reaches beyond domestic dominance. The fee alone raised eyebrows, but within the club, it's viewed as an investment in transformation rather than a gamble. There's also a sense that the manager has been carefully holding this card back, waiting for the right moment to unveil it. Whether that moment arrives sooner rather than later remains to be seen, but the clues are there. Subtle changes in training intensity, tactical adjustments, and the player's increasing involvement all point toward an imminent introduction. Of course, football thrives on expectation, and not every rumor blooms into reality. Yet this feels different. There's a quiet confidence, almost an inevitability, about the way this story is unfolding. If even half of what's being said proves true, Celtic supporters may be on the brink of witnessing the emergence of a player capable of leaving a lasting mark, not just on a season, but on the club's legacy itself. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.